What's up, everyone? You're listening to the RAS Project. My name is Ivan Temelkov, and I'm your host. On this podcast, we discuss entrepreneurship, personal development, family, tech, and marketing. Why should you listen to this podcast? This podcast is for those of you who are looking for life-changing advice and ways to thrive digitally with your business. As always, all content is 100% real, raw, and unfiltered. So today I actually have two guests on the podcast, and I'm really excited to jump into this. But before I introduce my guests, I want to introduce Dan Waldschmidt, who is with EDGY Conversations, or I'm sorry, he wrote a book called EDGY Conversations. Most days you'll find Dan heads down working on breakthrough strategies for his clients at EDGY Inc., a highly focused, invite-only business strategy execution company based out of Silicon Valley. And I also have Jill Stelfox, hopefully I didn't mispronounce that, who, let's just say that she has raised over $50 million and returned over $1 billion to investors, and also responsible behind the next gen platform for the NFL. Wow. Dan and Jill, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
You know, this is amazing. So like this is a monumental thing for this podcast because, as I said, there's never been in 6 years multiple guests, more than two, I should say. So I'm very excited about this because, you know, both of you have done some amazing things, and I only shared, you know, tidbits of your story. So, you know, Dan, let's go ahead and kick things off with you. Let's spend a couple of minutes just, you know, telling the audience a little bit about your story and like, how did you get to like what you're doing, you know, Silicon Valley and all this cool stuff. You know, tell us a little bit about like your background. Were you always entrepreneurial?
I never thought of myself as an entrepreneurial. And then I think now probably I don't know. I don't think I'm entrepreneurial now. I think of myself as like taking big risks. I'm going to describe all the things that make up what other people call entrepreneurial. But I guess, I've never thought of myself as that category. I just took big risks. I worked my ass off.
Yeah.
By the way, Jill and I are co-CEOs of EDGY. So that's why we're both together here.
Sure.
We should probably mention that. But yeah, I mean, I think I kind of learned a little bit about resilience and hard work just from kind of, you know, mowing lawns at an early age and kind of hustling through college as a sales manager at Sears of all places. I'm not responsible for them going out of business.
Yeah.
Had they listened to me, they'd be like the next Walmart, crushing it. Instead, they, you know, did some crazy stuff. But yeah, I think everything that I've gone through has put me on a journey to be where I'm at right now. So, super exciting.
Awesome. Well, Jill, you know, I want you to tell us in a couple of minutes, you know, a little bit about your background, your story. I know when you emailed me your bio, I'm like, holy shit, like this is an entire book in itself. So let's get the Cliff's Notes version of your story, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So funny thing, by the way, I grew up in a family of all girls. And I was the boy of the group, if you will, and played sports my whole life and was really competitive. And I had this great dad who told me, you can do anything you want to do. But he did want me to get a license. And so, like, go to college to get a license to do something. And so I got a CPA license. And believe it or not, became an accountant, which if you ever walk in a room and you get that feeling like these are not my people, that's kind of the feeling I got, is that I wasn't meant to do accounting. And so I started doing entrepreneurial things. And, you know, by the time I was 28, I was the CFO of a $250 million company. And by the time I was 30, I was the CEO of my first company. And I had this like personal goal to beat Dan and others to $1 million on my W-2. That was like my thing. Like, I will have made it if I have a W-2 that has $1 million on it. And so that became my driving force to do all the things I was doing.
Amazing, amazing. It's so I'm a big fan of stories. I always ask people, like, especially people that come on this podcast, about, what's your background? Like, were you always entrepreneurial? Like, did you ever, Dan was talking about mowing lawns, and, I'm an Eastern European. My family immigrated to the US. Well, my father 30 years ago now. So I think the grit and the work ethic has always been at my core, because let's face it, I grew up in a former communist country. And so, you always had to work for everything. Nothing was given to you. And so when I have the privilege to have people like you on the podcast, I always ask, like, did you always, like, were you born and then you were like, oh, one day I'm going to start a company, right? Or did your interest change, or what led up to it? So let's talk a little bit about EDGY, and like, how did that all come together? How did you guys meet?
Oh, geez. So we've known each other like 15, like a long time. We were both CEOs in Washington, D.C., and we joined a networking group where you learn and grow and develop yourself, personal development group. And so that's where we developed this relationship. And then we kind of did a bunch of projects together. I worked for Jill worked for me. We worked together, and she went off to build a $1 billion success story. I went and built a company and sold it. And then I had built or started building what is now EDGY. And I'm like, we ought to just do this thing together. And so one conversation led to another. And next thing you know, we're I don't know, Ivan. It's just,
yeah.
It's wonderful.
I'll tell you the really cool part about this, though, is that we trust each other implicitly. And I think that's one of those things in business that sometimes is lacking, is great trusting relationships. And when you have that, what you can accomplish is literally unbelievable. It's amazing.
It's so ironic that you both said that, trust, because I'm a big proponent of likability, trust, and value. These are, in fact, the three core elements that I wholeheartedly believe in. Of course, the fourth one is persuasion, because you got to be a little bit persuasive, because those three things alone are not going to get you over the hump. And this is something that I personally, from a personal brand standpoint, have conveyed out into the stratosphere. I'm a very likable guy. I can be trusted, and I share a lot of value. In fact, most times people say, Ivan, you're giving away tens of thousands of dollars worth of value for free, because it's who I am. But as a result, it helps me build these relationships and get access to people like you who come on this podcast. And I've had a billionaire before on the podcast too, but it just goes to show how important likability, trust, and value is in business. Because I think now, especially with what's happening with COVID-19 and this being one of the most difficult times, there's two types of people. There's people who are fearing, and those are people who are just resilient and are continuing to do the things that they have always done, because it's just who they are at their core with their DNA. They're resilient, they're risk takers, they're fearless, and they won't stop at anything. Those are, by the way, the people that I admire the most. They won't stop at anything. Even if a tank is coming at them, they won't stop, because they're just that resilient. And so it's interesting you talked about trust, because in business, you have to have trust. If people don't trust you, and trust is consistency in part. That's a big thing for me, is just that the way that I try to convey trust with people is by being consistent in everything that I do. And so it was interesting, very ironic actually, that you both said that. So EDGY, let's talk a little bit about EDGY and what EDGY does, and how are you guys changing, the business world with EDGY?
The cool thing about EDGY is that both of us have been CEOs at other companies, right? And we both have been successful at doing that. And being a successful CEO means there are really good days and really hard days, but you stick with the North Star and you do the right thing by your customers and your people. And, a lot of people listen to that and think, oh, that's a bunch of bullshit. But it's not. It is how you can be successful. And so we brought that and thought, how could we bring our superpowers of creating these great entities to other CEOs who are by themselves and worry at night about, how am I going to grow my business? How am I going to be successful? How is it all going to happen? And we would partner with them to help them grow sales and marketing.
Right.
And it's been for us amazing. We've been able to work with dozens of companies and create literally billions of dollars of revenue for those companies. And talk about giving, a big part of this is creating trust with those CEOs, because they're giving us their most important piece of their company, which is sales, right?
Yeah.
So you better trust us. So it takes us sometimes showing our passion and showing what we're capable of before the goodness comes back to us. And we're totally willing to do that, which is like one of the best things about, EDGY and what we do. And I'll tell you, we have more fun and passionate people at our company. I mean, we've got about 20-ish people in the company who help us, and they get so in love with the products and the companies that we bring to market. It's just literally, we're like warriors, living and dying over being successful with them. So,
one thing that you mentioned that I wanted to touch upon, because it's so ironic, is the North Star that you talked about. As a CEO, you keep following that North Star, right? Well, in my first TV interview that I recently did, one thing that I was asked is, so I risked literally everything for a dream. I've seen my father, who's a fellow entrepreneur, build a business from the ground up with 2 hands and a brain, basically. And they were asking me, so what did it feel like risking and sacrificing everything? And I said, it was a horrible feeling, because I think in part on the inside, I was wanting gratification, because I think that's what most people in business, especially entrepreneurs early on, especially look for, is instant gratification, right? So like, I do something, how much money am I going to generate, or how am I going to grow my business, as opposed to just being focused and passionate about what you do. Because if you're really good at what you do, it's only a matter of time before it comes to fruition, right? But the one thing you said is, I've given away a lot of free information, a lot. And what I've seen happen is, as a result, is in the beginning, it was like, okay, I'm doing all this social video and building my personal brand, but I'm not getting anything out of it. Like, I'm barely getting people who are commenting and liking this. And then last year, so I was immediately like, why am I wasting hours and hours and hours of putting in this time and sharing it on social media? And mind you, been doing this for 26 years now, being in the digital space, right? And so, but last year I got my first really, really big contract, and it was mainly because I was exposing the transparency behind who I am, my character, my personality. And mind you, I'm a guy who's very unconventional. I curse a lot also. In fact, I'm surprised I haven't thrown an F-bomb around. Literally, that's what the RAS Project in part is about. Is very, it's raw, it's real, because for so many years I held everything back. And I spent a long time also in the agency environment, 13 years alone, and I saw how much people were holding back, and that wasn't me. It was just a fabricated version of what I wanted society to perceive me as. And then when I peeled back, as they say, took off the gloves, and it's like, screw this, I'm going to be myself, like, things really just started taking off. And so when you were talking about both of you being CEOs in the past, I think it just really solidifies the fact that just being yourself, just putting out value, being passionate, following the North Star, that it exists when the rest of the world is telling you that it doesn't exist, or it's there, but you'll never reach it. Because 99% of society will tell you just that you'll never reach the North Star. Mind you, as an Eastern European, I was always told to follow the yellow brick road, go to school, get a degree, get a job, this, and this. Well, you know what? I'd be like everyone else right now if that was the case. I'd be like everyone else, still trying to chase a paycheck. And the reality of things is most Americans can even sustain a $500 unexpected cost because 80% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. So why would I want to follow the yellow brick road when the yellow brick road would put me in that bubble of the 80%? So it's interesting you mentioned some of these things, and that's why I'm elaborating upon this, is because I think a lot of people are just swayed by what society, a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in the beginning, are swayed into thinking that I need to do things traditionally like everybody else been doing it. No, screw that. The reason why you're going to grow and be better and accomplish your dreams and goals is because you're doing the complete opposite of what everybody else is doing. And that's the reality of it. So I know we didn't talk, a lot about EDGY, but you said you're a 20-person company. Let's talk a little bit more about, what does EDGY specifically do and how are you helping other companies? And let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we say superpowers for CEOs. So we think that mid-market CEOs, these are companies between 30 million and let's say 500 million, where you're not a startup and you're not $1 billion publicly traded company, but that's a unique lane where you can get pinched from the bottom, you can get stepped on from the top, and so it requires a set of skills that aren't really being offered right now in mid-market. And what that is an engagement that says, okay, you think you need help with this thing, likely looks like more leads, more sales, better marketing. What you really need help in is in like fixing this whole thing, which might include messaging and interdepartmental structure, leadership. And so we have a unique process whereby we go in and we make these radical shifts, and clients end up, blown away by not just the results, the monetary results, but the growth of their team members and, their ability to achieve success that, they've just been stuck at. They've been stuck for like the last few years, and then we just help them kind of navigate around it. So it's not easy because it requires a huge investment emotionally for us and financially from them. But if you can match that up, their desire with a work ethic and a bit of coachability, there's almost endless possibility.
So one of the reasons that I asked you to elaborate upon who you specifically work with is because I'm a big proponent of mind, body, and soul, and those three things really being in tune. Now, what you talked about is, you work with CEOs, mid-market companies, so 30 million above in gross revenue, right? Now, the higher you get up in business, the more intricate it becomes to have a very strong mindset. Not only that, but any successful CEO out there is, why do they exercise? Why do they eat right? Why they're spiritually and from a faith standpoint in tune? It's because it has a huge correlation and benefit to how you operate as a human being. And that was actually something that, for me personally, 6 years ago when I started cycling, and to this day, I still have no idea why I even started cycling, but it's probably one of the best things that I've done. And, over the years, I realized that it wasn't about fitness. I mean, the fitness portion of it was great, but it was about mind therapy. It was about clarity. It was about, just really having the mind shift of realizing how much more potential I have as a human being, that I've been so limited. I'm probably operating at like 3% capacity when in reality, I still have 97%, to catch up on. So I've really only been tapping into, 3% of my true potential. And so when you were talking about some of these things of how you work with different CEOs, it just really solidified the fact of the importance behind mindset, body, soul, like having all these three things in tune to become the best version of yourself. And if you've got those three things, if you're thinking right, if your body is in the right state, physically, and then your soul is at peace, you can literally conquer some amazing things. You can build companies. And I've seen just about every single successful person, that I have had the opportunity to interview achieve those things because they had those three things. Not to mention is that, the average CEO reads about 60 books a year. And here's me, I'm reading 0 books. So guess what? Like, Ivan, you probably need to start reading some books. It's not because you hate reading. It's just you got to find the time, right? So like there's these constants and these patterns that successful people embrace. And I think that's probably a lot of what you teach a lot of these mid-market CEOs, is really how to open up their brains and how to open up their true potential and understand that this isn't just about money. I mean, I look like, you know, the late Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or Bill Gates, even now, like some of the most prominent, Jeff Bezos, you know, some of the most prominent individuals in the world. And I'm like, well, their mind is right, their body's right, their soul is right, and there's a reason they're doing these three things. And if these three things are beneficial to them, they can be beneficial to me. So I think that's really cool that, you know, you're really working with CEOs kind of, you know, unlock their untapped potential, because that's really what it comes down to, right?
Yeah, it's, you know, what's interesting about kind of what you said too is that if you think about a sports analogy, right, you would never go and be an Olympic swimmer without a coach, right? You just wouldn't do it. You wouldn't be as successful as you could be if you didn't have a coach. And it's one of the reasons that we have been together, is that we always have a coach. And so I think the key for us is coaching and guiding these CEOs from a humble place of, if we were in your shoes, if it was our people and our budget and our money and our time, sure, what would we spend time doing, thinking, caring about? And you're right, by the way, successful people, it's mind, body, and soul is a big piece of this. And we, even in our company, you know, for example, in COVID-19, we get together every single day now. We have a call every single day because we miss each other. We miss the contact, right? And so we have time where we laugh and joke and tease and all the things that we would do if we saw each other. Yeah. We just make time for that in the day, because it's so, the connection part of COVID-19 has been a big challenge. And I just think, you know, being able to continue that is important. So yeah, it's all about mind, body, and soul. By the way, little professional tip, the way you get the books in is audio books, and you do it while you're working out. So you listen to an audio book while you're on the bike or you're running or you're on a walk. That's how you like get it in. So pro tip there.
That's an excellent tip. You know, and it's interesting you said that, because, you know, I'm a guy who, I love listening to music when I'm working out. And speaking of COVID-19 is, you know, going from 3 days per week at the gym to like, how am I going to get creative with workouts at home? I mean, yes, I do cycle about once per week. And now, especially with the weather here in the Midwest, you know, getting a little bit warmer, it's becoming, you know, a lot easier to get that in, as opposed to during the winter months. Right. But what I also noticed, it's interesting you said that, is because I started reading Think and Grow Rich, and I actually got it on Amazon Kindle. And I realized, you know what, it's not, so I'm not a traditional reader where like I'd open a book. Like I could never, I would start a book and then I wouldn't finish it. And I realized that like there was something about, maybe because I've been so digital centric for 26 years, like I've literally lived on my phone, you know, more or less since, you know, the iPhone's been around or smartphone's been around, that I've had to reinvent the way that I consume information, which I already consume it digitally. I express it digitally through blogs and this podcast and everything else. And to start consuming knowledge via audiobooks and, you know, downloading them on my phone, because that's my environment, bringing it to my environment. But what you just said about that, I think is important to notate, is just that, you know, with people who don't read or struggle with reading, is that you just have to bring that to your environment to make it more natural, to where it feels like you can consume it a lot easier, because me opening up a traditional book and reading it, it's probably not going to happen. But reading it on my phone, I'll be more likely to do it, because I already spend a ridiculous amount of hours on my phone every single day between social media and email and phone calls and whatnot. So, but that's very important. The most important is extracting that knowledge from that and getting that perspective. Is really important, because and the fact that you solidified mind, body, and soul, which, by the way, that was a YouTube video that I shot like almost 2 years ago while I was on my bike, just holding the phone, and it just came to my mind. I was like, mind, body, soul, mind, body, soul. I was like, Ivan, this is really important. Like, you've been hearing this everywhere, but like, you really need to become a practitioner of this. And mind you, it's not that I am not a practitioner. It's that I was unwilling to do it. And that's what most people don't understand, is that there's a difference between unwilling to do it, not being able to do it, and not doing it. There's a drastic difference, because everyone can do this. It's just bringing yourself to doing it, like mind, body, soul, getting all those three things intact. So it's really interesting that you mentioned, what EDGY does and how you work with these CEOs, because it goes to show that it's not just like someone like me, like the underdog or the average entrepreneur. It's like these CEOs that are making six figures and more, even millions of dollars per year, that struggle with the mindset, the body, and the soul aspect, and just having the right perspective, which is what you bring to the table. So in essence, they're just like us. They're no different. It's just they're struggling from a perspective standpoint, from a mindset standpoint, from getting their body in tune, from getting their soul at peace, to be able to grow to the next level. So, this conversation can literally go endlessly. I really enjoy these kinds of conversations, especially, from both of you who you've been in the game for quite some time. You've seen all kinds of different shit. You've done all kinds of things. But the biggest thing you mentioned towards the end with COVID-19, Jill, was the connectivity with your team and the importance of that. Because I'm a firm believer that business is about helping people, because people buy you. They don't buy your company. They buy who you are, your personality and character. So as CEOs of a company of 20 plus individuals, it shows a lot about your grit and connectivity with your employees. That's really important, because honestly, I've worked with some people who don't even give two shits about their employees. They don't even spend an hour a week just to hop on a conference call. They're like, hey, what's going on? What you've been working on this week? Let's not talk about business and work, but what's happening in your life? How are the kids? Like, how are you doing right now? Do you need help with anything? And this is in part, with my business, that I've really focused on human marketing and human businesses, because I've realized that that's such a void, I think, in business and marketing, that everybody's talking about it, but maybe only 1% of people are actually doing it. And so I want to thank both of you, for coming on. And before we jump off, can you throw out some links and social handles? How can people connect with you out there?
So I think if you're going to connect, you have to connect with Jill, because I'm on LinkedIn, but that's the only place you'll find me these days.
Okay.
Just hit, Dan Waldschmidt, do the googly thing, and you'll find me on places.
Awesome.
You can find EDGY is at edgy.bz. So edgy.bz, it's the company. And then I'm on LinkedIn, Jill Stelfox, and I'm on Twitter, Jill Stelfox as well. And so you can DM me on Twitter. I'm also on Instagram, and that's where you'll find the pictures of me with liquor.
All right. We need to have a side chat about that. That is awesome. Well, Dan, Jill, this was an absolute pleasure. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you both for jumping on here.